full of you.
Why don't you just tell us your name?
The whole neighborhood is yapping about how 2 goons got the beat down last night. I heard it was 4 guys.
What is up, Gear Squad? No. It's not your regularly scheduled program. Welcome to Peach's Picks, your one-stop podcast shop for all the geeky crap your mom doesn't care about, with a little bit of a reactions video. We watched Luke Cage.
We did.
Marvel's Luke Cage, the Netflix original, the first 2 episodes, and of course, your channel. Peach's Picks new home for the 2nd season. We have Brandon Nathaniel Moses Davis, Chaingear Gaming. Hello, as always. And to my left, the OG, the Black Knight of comic books, Jair James. Now, these kids don't know you. We have a much wider audience here in our new home of Chaingear Gaming, but this guy was on Season 1, Episode 1 of Peach's Picks, where we talked about our favorite minority characters in gaming, and we couldn't think of a better person to watch this series with us. Now, when it comes to the personal attachment of the character Luke Cage, I don't know anything about him. The most that I know about Luke Cage comes from Spider-Man, because I know that he and Spider-Man are close friends. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they're both from New York. He's from Queens. He predominantly stays in Queens and Harlem in the comics, at least the old stuff that I read. Now, this stuff was around between, 1999 and 2003, the runs I've read with Luke Cage and Spider-Man. And also, he made a cameo in Web of Shadows as sort of like a tutorial for that game. So, before we get to you, do you know anything about Luke Cage, the character?
That's exactly what I know. Web of Shadows, his cameo.
Yep.
Literally, that's exactly.
Go on, Peter. You need to press B in order to, attach
Yeah,
it.
I think I remember things like that. I always remember, Spider-Man games, or, not Spider-Man movies, obviously, Spider-Man games, maybe Spider-Man comics, and seeing, Luke Cage, just, large black man with Spidey. So, that's how I, always thought about that. And then, I think I was probably just looking into, black superheroes and stuff, and I saw Luke Cage, and probably was, or probably other video games that have Marvel people in their universes, and Luke Cage is in it. So
definitely one of the most important black characters in comics. I would say that he is up there with the Falcon and Black Panther, and seeing how he debuted in Jessica Jones, I was like, there's no way they're not going to do a spin-off series with Luke Cage, because he comes from the ripe blaxploitation era of the 70s and stuff like that, where you had characters like him and Jon Stewart's Green Lantern, and you had what other characters came out of that era besides those two? We had Black Lightning. Yeah. Any other prominent characters?
You had Black Lightning, I believe Monica Rambeau, who, if you didn't know, she is what we refer to as Spectrum, or the original Ms. Marvel. Captain Marvel, I'm sorry.
Yeah, because she's not Miss Marvel anymore. No. They finally, after so many years of fighting for Captain Marvel, finally that name, they finally got it. So Jair, obviously you're the big comic book guy, even though, because I used to be funny in fact, you are way more than I am. So why don't you tell us your attachment to this character and why he resonates with you so much?
So
So
Luke Cage is sort of the everyman that everybody in the hood can relate to. Starting in his debut June 1972, he was the quintessential character of all of blaxploitation. He's essentially one of the ones who began it in the first place. It was Marvel's way of trying to tend to the desires of African American readers and people, and make them think that, oh, hey, we understand y'all. We want you guys to read our comics. So
this is Stan Lee talking.
Yeah. So here's the character that you can relate to.
Hello, little black boys.
I
show up at your random movies.
With a little more brown in his hair, being I got a black character for you guys. He's fantastic.
I can't wait to show him.
Who was Luke written by, actually? Originally, who created the character? Do you remember?
It escapes me, actually.
Yeah?
It really does.
Oh, that's a little Marvel Wiki step away, right? Yeah. So we watched the first 2 episodes. Now, obviously, this is a sequel series to Marvel's first Netflix original, Jessica Jones, which so far I've watched around more than half.
Yeah, it's kind of to give some background for people who maybe have no idea what we're talking about. Netflix has a huge partnership with Marvel and apparently ABC Films, which I didn't know.
Yeah, they did some production.
And it started with Daredevil, right? So it starts with Daredevil, and then Jessica Jones, and now Luke Cage. Really,
is ABC the one that airs Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
Yes.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, and so they all have this nice partnership going on. It's pretty dope, and it's all kind of culminating to the Defenders, which is a whole other conversation, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if you guys have seen Daredevil, then you guys can watch this. If you guys have seen Jessica Jones, you should watch this. If you haven't seen any of them, you should probably watch them all.
I still get to see the second season of Daredevil, actually.
Oh yeah, I watch every single time they come out. I just binge them.
Yeah,
every time.
So when it comes to the Netflix Marvel Cinematic Universe, I've watched the first season of Daredevil twice, and I've watched around more than half of Jessica Jones, and we watched the first 2 episodes of Luke Cage here. Now, the thing here is that the show's awesome and very, 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 very black, very black. And they really want to make an effort to remind you of that every 2 seconds. But the thing is, it comes for good things, but it also comes from some really awkward lines. So far, in terms of the script, some of this stuff is awesome, and some of this stuff is... Okay, that's... Alright. Oh my gosh, these lines are a little bit like middle school Minority Fairy Tale, little levels of embarrassing. Like, definitely some of the weird comic book writing one-liners come out in spades. And, ooh, man. I said this before we started recording. Again, this show is very minority intensive in terms of its cast. Like, there are very few white characters. I'm not sure what ethnicity Shades is, the character Shades.
I mean, he's white.
Yeah.
No matter what his ethnicity is. He's
white.
Right. I mean, race-wise, he's white. If I look at him and I don't think he's something else, he's white. Right?
Oh, right.
Ethnicity, background, I have no idea.
Right. Yeah, but most of the cast is black, and might I say, almost unapologetically black.
You may say that.
Yeah, I say unapologetically black. So, it's interesting to see the juxtaposition of having, a majorly black cast and seeing, a few white characters pop up. You're like, oh, look, a white guy. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's one, and they're unapologetically white.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
True.
Yeah. I only can think of one off the top of my head. Yeah. And 2, if, depending on
you got the boss that Luke Cage works for in the bar, and then you have the partner of Detective Misty Knight.
Yeah, that's the one.
Mr. Scarf.
And Mr. Scarf. So, the first thing that I want to talk about is what do we think of the, finally Luke Cage is brought to the forefront here in his own series. What do you think? I'm going to look up the actor's name right now, but how do you think his performance was so far with the first 2 episodes that we've seen? Because I feel as though we've finally seen the depth of him in the second one in terms of his emotional range.
I'll let Jared go first.
Sure.
I personally believe he needs to get comfortable with this role. And all of maybe 2 or 3 episodes of Jessica Jones that he was in, he was it seemed like he was getting his bearings at being Luke Cage. Luke Cage is both a really solid, firm-believing, stoic character, but he is also really witty and really intelligible when need be. And I can see traces of that when this actor portrays him. It's just that he hasn't gotten comfortable enough quite yet to portray the entirety of Cage in his complexity. Because another thing about Cage is that he's the strong black man stereotype, archetype sort of thing. And
which people can argue and say that in terms of Marvel Comics and its history, he's basically the one that kind of started that archetype in comics in general. But again, he definitely came from the era in which he originated then.
But so far, what we've gotten is a different archetype. The sort of smooth character, smooth-talking, soft-spoken, dark-skinned, love of every woman kind of character.
Which is to say that Mike Coulter is the man that plays Luke Cage. Who's not to say that he's definitely the most handsome man in the room in every single scene that he's in, and probably in life. So, I gotta say, as someone that doesn't know the character excessively well, other than a mentor relationship with Spider-Man and, of course, Jessica Jones' love interest, it's, he's kind of reminds me, he's a strong, silent type. He's the kind of guy that's I had these powers, I don't want them. He's very stereotypical in, what is often a negative with Marvel characters. I have superpowers, and I don't like my superpowers because I'm a Marvel superhero, and everything is awful. But he's, I like what he's trying to do. He's this is a part of me that I just want to stay in the past. He's a character that is afflicted and tortured by his past and just keeps lapping around in loops. And he's kind of like a object of which a trail of destruction follows him wherever he goes. So he's kind of like Wolverine in that aspect, right? Yeah. But So far, like I think Mike comes off as believable when it comes to Luke Cage, but it's a matter of not giving him enough to do, especially in these two episodes. Like again, finally we see the emotional range that he has at the end of the second episode. Really, overall he was good. I think who really took not really stole the show, but is definitely more interesting to me is the villain, Cottonmouth, Mahershala Ali. I really liked him. He was just like, I'm the smooth gangster character, and I'm the villain, and I'm kind of like Wilson Fisk. Like, I like to talk. I'm very eloquent.
I like to look at white walls.
We need to talk like this before I punch a man's face in.
Listen, I'm not sure why I'm here.
So if Wilson Fisk was black and suave, then I guess that would be Cottonmouth. Which, funny enough, Wilson Fisk was black in the Ben Affleck Daredevil in 2002. Random bit of trivia there. So, overall, before we get into Cottonmouth in general, what did you think of Luke Cage?
So when you ask me that, do you mean what do I think? So I knew Luke Cage before
his performance and his character in this show.
I think it's okay. So far, I think Luke Cage is a character. I have to say overall, I guess before I even mention him, this show, for those that may or may not know, Michael J. White, who is the star of Black Dynamite and Blood and Bone. He's in a couple other things, but it reminds me a lot of that. If you ever watch Blood and Bone, fantastic movie, again featuring Michael J. White, the story is almost exactly the same so far. Michael J. White was in prison, doesn't want to, use his ridiculous kung fu strategy to, help people and things like that. And then something happens to him personally, and all of a sudden he does. And there's a really suave black guy, and he's doing a whole bunch of things because he wants to help people, but not really. And the same exact story is happening, and this is a common black exploitation thing anyway.
Yes.
And obviously, I think in this way they're trying to own that black exploitation and change it to something more positive instead of just straight exploitation.
Yep.
So it's a very familiar thing that I've seen. It's a trope that I've seen before. And to be honest, again, I think you might be right about the fact that this might be one of the first ones back in the comic books that might have been one of the first things that started this kind of black exploitation. But in general, I think it's fine. I think Luke Cage, as a character, is intriguing. Obviously, I have seen Jessica Jones and I have seen all of Daredevil, and so they mention Luke Cage every once in a while, and he's just always standoffish, and I'm completely with Jair on the fact that I need him to grow into who Luke Cage is supposed to be. Because right now he's just like you said, I didn't know this was a stereotype. But everyone's I don't like my powers. I'm literally invincible. And I think it's even harder to believe when you're literally just invincible. It's not like you have laser eyes. No, you're it's not like you're like a mutant, because the mutants in X-Men are constantly struggle with being mutants because it's hard. Luke Cage is just invincible. It's
a very sexy, invincible man.
I'm just so beautiful and invincible. What do I do with my life? I'm come on, dude. Yeah, seriously. And I don't know. And so I think there is this past thing. A lot of this show reminds me of Orange is the New Black, another Netflix original. And the fact that it's why are you here? What's going on? They constantly have to go back and explain it to you. Also very similar to all of Michael J. White's movies, at least the two major ones. Again, Blood and Bone and Black Dynamite. So all in all, I think it's good. I'm just kind of waiting. I think Netflix knows that when they create a show that you're going to binge watch, they're doing it on purpose. I'm sitting there 100%. All right, Luke, I'm going to keep watching because I know you're coming with something, and they'll do it. Same thing happened with Daredevil and Jessica Jones.
And here's another sort of trope that actually the Marvel, TV, Netflix universe kind of created, was a sense of vulnerability between heroes, between heroes and the villains.
Right.
Like you saw with Daredevil and Kingpin, both of them questioning their authenticity and questioning their morals, and they both have resolve. They both think they're trying to do good. Cottonmouth may not exactly be the guy who's this is for the good of everybody, but he does show a certain level of vulnerability, especially regarding his business and trying to keep it afloat. One of the things that they touched upon within this episode, I don't want to get into like detail.
Right.
Yeah, of course,
spoilers, right?
Because you're one episode ahead of us.
Yeah, but there was a certain event that caused him to be in conflict with the fact that he is a crime boss essentially, and the game has changed. Back in the early days, if you guys knew like what the hood was like before maybe 2000 or something,
Yeah.
it wasn't like how it is now, where people could just run up to a mother and her children and just shoot them for no apparent reason. There were laws, there were quarters where certain gang members did not want to get into. There was something about not approaching your mother and talking smack that they all understood. And it seems like he's one of those characters who would get into that.
Right.
And they sort of allude to it.
To which the line, there used to be rules to this sort of thing, comes into play.
Yeah.
Can I actually make mention of that? I think that's a really good point. One thing I am loving about this movie, this show, is that we mentioned that it's like unapologetically black. Not so much that like knowing like everyone can watch it. It's very like digestible.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the most important parts. Was, again, without spoilers, the main bad guy so far as we know, Cottonmouth, which I'm pretty sure isn't with the main bad guy, which we can talk about later off camera. But Cottonmouth showed this vulnerable side where he even explains. He's like, no, all of the black people before us that did all of these things, they did it so I can do what I'm doing, so I can have power. Fun fact, a little bit of trivia for you guys. For those that don't know Kwanzaa, which is the African American holiday, there's all these words. There's 7 or something I think it's 7 words. Yeah. And they all have to do with basically black prosperity. So there's like unity and financial health and things like that. And these are all things that like the black community, because we were so pushed out, was one of those things where we're going to keep this internal and we're going to do it. That's who Cottonmouth represents.
Sure.
Is this Malcolm X type of figure.
That's a very good way to apply it, actually.
Where that's not the case for Luke Cage. Luke Cage is becoming something. We don't know who he's becoming yet because we're only in the second episode. But
if they left him more room to develop and Jessica Jones, I think we would have legitimately missed out on this series in a sense that maybe as we progress, remember, we only saw the first 2 episodes, maybe we'll watch him progress into the kind of hero that Marvel Studios wants him to be and what kind of archetype, what shoes he needs to fill for the Defenders. Because if it was just like, this man has something taken away from him and he decides to step up, what separates him from Daredevil or something like that, you know what I mean?
Or all of them.
Or Frank Castle.
And that's where I defer, considering the fact that I've seen the 3rd episode and also am extremely over-analytical. I noticed...
Welcome to this podcast.
Yes. I noticed between his mannerisms around the end of the 3rd episode, if you guys
Luke's
have already
mannerisms.
watched it. Luke's mannerisms.
Okay.
Which we might watch after this, actually.
Yes. And also a really big thing that happens in the literal last minute that sort of puts this spin on it, where it's no longer about him finding retribution. And it's not going to be what you think it is, like a normal revenge story like any other kind of movie archetype.
Good.
Because one thing that you know between the two, as opposed to like Wilson Fisk or Daredevil, is that they have a common vulnerability in the form of the character Pops, who I was like the second you walked in. I'm not gonna spoil it, obviously, but they do have that common ground. Like this is the character that like formed a shop so that way he can get these kids off the streets and into a safe like neutral space where they can hang out.
And that's not actually like what I mean. That was like brilliant, but the thing I'm getting to is the comparison to Daredevil and Kingpin, and how their vulnerability wasn't just what they could do and their abilities and whether or not they should use it. It was the community that fell into their hands. What you see in the first 2 episodes between Cottonmouth and his sister, the councilwoman.
Cousin, I think.
Cousin. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
That's why he says cuz.
Cuz. Nah. So what you see is this whole dichotomy where they're trying to decide what's best for the community.
Right.
They're trying to sort of enact their own law or see how things fit. A lot of things happen that are parallel with Daredevil's mentality alongside Kingpin's, whereas they're sort of vulnerable when it comes to deciding what it is they can and should do for the community. And you see in the first episode Luke comes into situations with that, whereas everyone wants him to do something, but he doesn't want to. It's not because of the fact that he can't. It's because of the fact that maybe if he did, what would happen and who would get instigated and want to do something to inhibit him.
It's the sort of thing where the character is faced with the dilemma that personally affects them, but if they were to remove it, the status quo would be disrupted. Now, Luke seems to be the kind of archetypal character that Mad Max actually fills, in the sense that the story doesn't necessarily center around him. Well, it does, but he's the kind of character that often falls into other people's stories and acts accordingly when something is taken away from him, or like he's just pushing the situation that's gone too far. Especially that's the case with Fury Road and the Road Warrior and that sort of thing. But overall, like, I think we definitely talked about the themes of the show, like things that we, I think let's touch around the rest of the cast in terms of supporting cast. And, obviously we already touched on Copperhead and such. Is there anything that you'd like to say about Copperhead? Oh wait, tell us. Yeah, I keep saying Copperhead because he's another villain. And also he's a snake villain who want to tell us who Cottonmouth was in the original source material, by the way.
In the original source material, there were two versions of Cottonmouth. One was obviously what this is not a guy in a purple snake costume going around biting people.
It's kind of like Jessica Jones, the main villain there.
He's supposed to be a big purple man.
Yeah, not the case. Thank God.
Not David Tennant.
But what the second iteration is actually closer to what he is, sort of a crime boss pimp type kind of character, who enacts his martial law in the way tries to mold things the way he fits. He's sort of this crime boss, but he's on such an obscure level, whereas other crime bosses take advantage of him, which you clearly see in this series so far.
Yeah, we've definitely heard of, without spoiling, there is another crime boss that we've heard of so far. We don't know about what's going to happen with him. And there's another side character, Shades, that randomly pops up who works for this other crime boss, and we're kind of like, oh, what's going to happen? And we know that there's multiple crime bosses in this universe. Obviously, Wilson Fisk, one of the biggest.
If we didn't, we wouldn't have a Netflix series. So.
Yeah, right. So, but yeah, good point.
So I like the villain, and I definitely like the tone that they're going for, and like we said before, they're unapologetically black exploitation for this, for the sake of like Luke's heritage and what this is. For the sake of like dialogue and stuff like that, it can get a little bit heavy-handed at sometimes because some of it is just like awkwardly jaded. Because especially at the end of the second episode, it's like we're talking about the black man that was killed during the what was that?
The American Revolution.
Yeah, the American Revolution and stuff like that.
Like the
the Boston Massacre.
The massacre. Chris Visadix, if you don't know, he was a former slave, free man. He didn't really lead the first line. He sort of stepped to the front of this huge scale revolt within the city, and as consequence, he was the first person to be killed in this act. They allude to, especially in the series, that he was an important figure because he acted as a catalyst for all the not more or less conflict, but the backlash and the revolt against the conflict within the community.
Which, of course, is a parallel to what Luke is going through, like through his loss and that sort of thing. But when it comes to a dialogue, there will be these entire 3 to 7 minute stretches of, let me talk to you about Black history today, and let's talk about Harlem. And it's like, this is really cool for stuff, but it's one of those things where characters can't develop on their own motifs or quirks or their interpersonal relationships. It's like, let's take some Black history and let's just sandwich it in here a little bit, and then let's let the plot move forward from that thing. So in terms thematically of it being Black exploitation and stuff, it does get a little bit muddled and stuff for the sake of Luke punched one person in this show so far. All right, where's that stuff? So that's the bit of me. It's like, I want my comic book fix, this sort of thing. But as obviously a minority viewer, I'm like, this is awesome. But
yeah, I feel like the first thing I want to mention 2 things. One is so people understand, Black exploitation is so we get an understanding of that, was the exploitation of Black people as stereotypes, right? So they would make it, so they would make a movie and be like, this is the Black man, he's crazy, not very helpful. Go ahead.
Think about Samuel L. Jackson, what he is in every single interpretation. He's always Samuel L. Jackson, the loud guy who doesn't take any stuff from anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So think movies like Black Dynamite and
Black Dynamite and Blood and Bone are like mockeries of black exploitation,
right? Of course,
because black exploitation was like a real thing. Like they would it looks funny because you're like, this is ridiculous, but it was real. Like they'd be like, yeah, this is the black man, goes out and takes white women and all this stuff. Which
is more apparent in comic books too, because the way do you remember the quote of which Jon Stewart debuted on the cover of Green Lantern when he first became a Green Lantern?
I vaguely do.
I think I remember this.
Like he's puffed out afro. He has Hal Jordan by the cuff of his sleeve, being like, "What did they get a load of me?"
Yeah. And it's just kind of like, all right. But I think one thing that this show does really well is show the spectrum of like blackness, more or less.
Yeah.
Luke Cage is not. Like, I wouldn't say he is unapologetically black, right?
He's not hood.
No, he's not. He's very much, very well-spoken and,
intelligent, very intelligent.
Yeah, and I think, which is always nice to see. Even the main villain is, very well-spoken.
I think he went up to go get a bowl of chips or something in the 3 minutes that Luke Cage was talking about the poetry that he preferred with Pops.
Yeah. So this is my second thing, was the fact that... the lines in this show. There is this random Black history, which I'm actually okay with. It's still the delivery of it that is the problem.
Oh, yeah.
The Black history thing I think is cool, especially because that is in Harlem, in a lot of places, a lot of cities, you'll see those kinds of things.
It's a very Bostonian thing to say, to bring up the American Revolution that every era to sort of
exactly. And so
very
I think
true.
and so I think here, or in this show. In the issue, it just seems to constantly be a mixture of writing and bad delivery. I don't know if you wanted to get into this now or whatever, but
we're going to go into the supporting cast and their delivery and stuff.
Cool, yeah. I mean, things that I like and don't like. I mean, if we want to talk about the supporting cast, I mean, in general, I think all the cast is great. I think they're all every piece seems worth having. Even Luke Cage's old boss at the club, that one scene which you guys will see, you watch it, was worthless, but it wasn't completely worthless, right? I was all right, this guy is another white guy that gets ignored by Luke, that Luke Cage ignores, giving Luke Cage more power on stage, right? Which I think is great. But it's just all the lines and the delivery, again, without spoiling anything.
There's this monologue about Benjamin Franklin being on the $100
bill. It's so stupid. It's why are you guys talking? The delivery of some of these lines. Honestly, if it wasn't Luke Cage and if it wasn't as black as it is, I don't know how much. And this is an issue in all Marvel shows so far. Yeah. Daredevil has the exact same issue. Foggy always messes. These lines are always bad. Even
you have that one set of characters that just is the cheese that ruins the immersion.
Matt's fine, and then even in Jessica Jones, honestly, I barely remember Jessica Jones aside from what I remember what happened, but I don't remember the character super well, and so I think there's always this issue with delivery, and in this show, it's the worst. I think
the main culprit is Frank Whaley as Raphael Scarf, who is the
white detective,
the white detective partner, and he's like,
"Hi, I'm here to be a right prick because I'm the white guy in the show, and I'm just I'm really the annoying guy. They'll have you rolling your eyes with every scene I'm in, and it's
The thing that really gets me is the fact that even though these characters can be unapologetically black, the few white characters that they have and give speaking roles are unapologetically white. In all ways, where it's that's not how a person would act in real life.
No.
But I do also chalk this up into sort of the problem with interpreting comics as TV shows and movies.
Sure, definitely.
Where you see a lot of this in DC, where they try to act so serious, but the lines, the delivering, and the themes are all wacky and they don't line up.
Yeah, I think you don't see that. The one time DC got it right is Christopher Nolan. And his Batman series. All the lines are really well delivered. Every single one. People may or may not like where are the drugs? But that, when delivered, it does seem like he is striking fear into the person that he's talking to, and it does seem
don't lie. When he had Joker hanging off of a thread at the end of The Dark Knight, when he's like, "This city
just showed you.
Like, the thing is, we make fun of that scene now, but back in the day, you were pin drop quiet.
And I still would be. You know what I mean? Like, if I was to rewatch Christopher Nolan's Batman currently, maybe not in 2 or 3 years, but
me
right
and Jai
now,
are going to do that to talk about why those movies works and why.
Yeah. I mean, I think those are. I mean, every line is delivered really well. I mean, even in X-Men, I think X-Men lines are delivered well, and I think they recognize even the camera angles in X-Men are always like very like I'm a hero, like and like that doesn't happen in Daredevil or Luke Cage or Jessica Jones. Though Jessica Jones does have these weird like detective angles, which I think are actually pretty cool. And so sometimes
Some
cheesy
very
lines.
noir shots in some.
Yeah. But I think for this, for Luke Cage, I don't know what it is. I don't know what the issue is. But I do feel like we have to go deeper in. Couple more episodes, and then maybe it's just an issue with the ramp up. Maybe the ramp up is difficult.
Now, what I am saying though is, regardless of its flaws, to date, I believe this is one of the best interpretations of what it's like to be a black person in low impoverished communities.
Yeah,
Of course.
Like, period. If you compare things like the Tyler Perry shows, much of BET, MTV, VH1's like sitcoms.
Unapologetically black in the sense of it being very genuine.
Yes, and it tries its best to give you such a believable atmosphere where everybody has this common ground. They know how things go. Things are real. This is real life for them. These people aren't trying to be stereotypes. They're not trying to be loud, obnoxious black people for the sake of making people laugh.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think I actually have a very different view on Tyler Perry's movies. I like them a lot. So I think there's differences. I think when you watch a Tyler Perry movie, the reason that my family loves those movies is because they do find commonality. But I do think that Luke Cage does a really great job by being able to say, by setting the ground, like what you said, like being able to set it in a way that's like, no, this is like, everyone's different here, everybody's acting differently, but like, you know, and I think they do a great job with showing like, yeah, back in the day, there were rules like this. I mean, I think they do a great job by being able to, I feel like if someone watched this and they were white and they didn't know much about the black community, I could go and be like, I could explain to them why I'm upset about something going on currently in our society and be able to explain, well, hey, I mean, you saw Luke Cage, right? And they're going to be like, yeah. And I'd be like, well, this is the kind of stuff that we struggle with within our own community, right? Like, how do we keep the black dollar within the black neighborhood when when we feel like we're getting, you know, suffocated because there's no money coming in? We have to do it illegally. That's a lot. That's why there's so much old illegal activity in black neighborhoods, because it was the only way, right? So like to get,
when it comes to the system, we're given the cards that we're dealt.
And I think the idea here is that, like, you know, hopefully, well, we'll see the progression. We'll see the progression of where it goes. But I love that. I think it's great that they're showing, like, you know, yeah, some people will do really well because of this or that. Even the very first scene, so semi-spoilers, but I think it's worth saying, when Luke Cage is sweeping up hair in a barbershop, and the kid's like, yeah, man, like, I was one of the best basketball players ever, or whatever. And he's like, yeah, but you have no money, so I calm down. And I think that was the perfect, you know, scene to start with, because, you know, so many black kids think they have to be basketball players, and Luke Cage tells them right now, he's like, hey, kids, you don't have to be a basketball player, because you still might not have any cash. And I think just right then and there, it's like, hey, listen, like, you know, I feel like I could go to a person who is not of color and explain to them, like, yeah, lots of kids think that this is the only way you can do it. It's only till recently that people are starting to say that's not the case. So I think you're right, that the groundwork is really being set here, and it looks fantastic. I mean, I think it's a really great representation of what it's like currently. Yeah. Currently, it's like that currently.
Yeah. And another thing is, like, I've seen actually articles about people talking about how he is essentially a new character, and how these are new situations as
a response to the tragedies that have occurred, like, so far this year.
Whereas Luke Cage himself, he isn't new. He reflects something that's been happening for generations, and why I originally started out saying he was an everyman character. He applies to every generation of young black people, because they endure the situation repeated time after time, decade after decade. And so and it's good that people associate him with, like, this need to break this cycle, and it also brings awareness to the fact that these people of color, these black people, they didn't want to be in these situations. So far, all we've seen is Luke Cage be handed situations and put in things where he didn't necessarily want to be part of. It just happened to him, even as far back in Jessica Jones. It turns out...
She is a prime example of stuff that's being handed to him and that he does know about.
Yeah. And so it's like this other problem where you need to not just recognize that this is a situation for the now, but it's a situation that's always been. He doesn't just represent one specific time. He represents a time, and he represents not just an era, but an overarching theme and a thing that needs to be approached. Now,
especially nowadays with what's going on with like the recent tragedies of so many lost innocent lives, and the violence that's been going on very recently. It's one of those things where having, I think it was the article that you said, like a bulletproof black man is sort of something that we needed to see, and something that was unapologetically like powerful.
Can I mention something about that?
Sure.
I think you had just said something about what was the first? You had just said something right in the beginning.
A bulletproof black man.
Right before that.
It's something very important to like note now, especially with the violence that's going on.
Yeah. I think. Oh man, every single character that speaks like a couple good lines and like is alive and you know in the show, these first 2 episodes, make a statement.
Oh, yeah.
Again, without spoilers, something happens to a side character of the main villain, and he represents the kind of person that people pin black people to be, right? Oh, like, you'll just go out and shoot up anything. You'll go out and like do all of this stuff, and I think he explains why he does what he does, because he wants to be accepted by people that did have rules, but he was like, who cares, we have the money, right? And that's what we need the money, right? That's what I was just taught. I was taught by you that I need to get the money, and I want you to be proud of me. And it was just like, oh wow, like that comes back full circle. It's like next time you actually do see someone who, you know, is thinking about doing these bad things, is it really because they just want to do bad things? Especially because you remember what happens to him in the very beginning when he sees something happen to someone he knows.
Right.
I know this is hard because I'm trying to avoid spoilers. He's not happy about it.
Right.
He's like, oh, this is too much for me. But then because he saw and learned from it, like, again, the main character is like, you know, there used to be rules to this. But that kid doesn't. But the guy, you know, again,
that's not what he was growing up.
He doesn't get. He just grew up seeing you kill someone, and now feels like he can do the same thing. It's really interesting, and I hope that everyone that sees this can gain all of those little glimmers.
It sort of emulates, or rather, it reflects how culture and how people present culture to be black culture now. Whereas there's this problem where everybody and their mama is shooting each other up, and there's sort of no boundaries. And this show presents like this generational sort of conflict.
And a
shift between the older generations, such as Pops and Cottonmouth, and the newer generations, such as Luke Cage and Cottonmouth's associate.
Yeah.
And sort of they show both that divide and that room for growth, and the two branches that people today can and do take.
Yeah, I think it shows like 3 generations. The generations of like, you know, Pops, Cottonmouth, and I guess Luke Cage or something like that. And then the kids under that, right?
Yep.
Because it shows it even shows some little like middle sections as well, and that's important to recognize when you're looking at the black community, because that's about, there's only a couple generations before that of true, you know, blackness in America, and so I think it's interesting to think about that way, is that they're showing every single step. Like, if you're this young, may be the reason why you're seeing people act this way. If you're this old, you may see this may be the reason why people are acting that way. And if they're not acting that way, you may understand why they wouldn't act that way because of things like this. So I agree 100%.
I'll say this about, like, it's very pertinent to see that out of 2 episodes of what it states culturally and socially about what's parallels are going on today, as well as being in Black America, obviously. There's just so much to take from this already. It's more than just another like superhero Netflix original.
Yeah, for sure.
But wrapping this conversation up, when it gets to the superhero stuff, when Luke Cage is about to be punched in the face, there's some cool stuff to be seen visually. Mind you, it is as gory and as messy as Jessica Jones, as Daredevil. So remember, like, I would say that the Netflix original series is definitely where you go to see your darker hits, as opposed to, you know, you're like,
hey, let's go get some food after we go beat up this giant space lizard like that we get in the regular cinematic universe. So, mind you, yes, it's still as gory and as awesome as it was the two previous series. But no, when we do see Luke Cage, like, being able to be Luke Cage and throwing people out of windows.
It's only happened once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was awesome.
Yeah.
Wait for episode 3.
Oh, we're waiting.
Yeah, speaking of waiting, I think we're going to go watch the third episode.
Sounds
but
good.
right now, we wanted to give you a quick Peaches Picks of our first impressions. We'll probably title this, We Love Luke Cage, ... so far.
Yeah, we'll see.
So, as always, I'm Peaches, your Mocha host with the most, with all the geeky crap your mom doesn't care about, and we'll be back at Chaingear Gaming sometime after you watch the entirety of the series, Gear Squad. Is it backwards? Because I'm not sure how, like...
It'll look like that.
Yeah, sure.
So however it looks like that, I don't know, I can't.
So if you have Netflix, obviously watch this series. It's very, very, very good, and we obviously want to keep binging. So... you stay frosty, everybody, and we'll see you in the next one. Like this video if you like it, dislike it if you dislike it, tell us what you thought about Luke Cage. So far,
Comment section.
comment section. No spoilers. Be nice. Be courteous. Take your spoilers to the subreddit. Which
Watching
is. Yeah, we are. Well, no, we're not. We're going to watch Luke Cage again. So, bye!